Time in coming on this, and appreciate everybody's patience with getting to this point. I was told once that a good bill has something that you like and some things that you don't like in it, and I think this would definitely fit into that category. For some of us, we like all of it, but I think this is a good step forward in what we need to do for property tax relief. I will try to hit some of the highlights here and not bore you with all the details and give you the same long-winded speech that I gave in committee. And my committee will probably appreciate that they don't hear it all again. But I do, if you do have questions, I will try to answer those the best. Things I think that are very important for us to understand when we look at property tax. It's different for everybody. It's different for you if you're in one city versus another city, or if you're not in the city at all. It depends on a lot of factors. Statewide, if you kind of look at the average, approximately 30% of your taxes will be from the cities. Approximately 30% will be from the county. Approximately 30% will be from school bonds and levies. And then 10% roughly is for special taxing districts. That's where your property taxes come from. Again, you notice nowhere in that was we do affect certain things, and we want to be able to provide tax relief to our citizens. You've all received the same emails and concerns from your constituents, just like I have, that they're looking for property tax relief. Something else that I think is very important to recognize, as much as we don't like it, at least I don't like it, I should say, is that property tax is a wealth tax. What I mean by that is the more property you own or the more value you have, the more you will pay. That's what property tax is. It was designed that way. That's how it continues to work. So as your value of your home goes up, you will pay more. That's just what property tax is. It is a wealth tax. And we know with the way that markets have been going lately, we've seen increases in some areas much higher than we have in other areas. And that's affected people, and people, have been wanting property tax relief. And so we tried to come up with a solution for some of that property tax relief. One of the things that we did not want to do with this property tax bill was to shift it to another property tax payer. We didn't want to just say, hey, we're going to give one person property tax relief at the expense of another. And so this bill, I think, found a great compromise on that. So let me talk a little bit about the funding sources of where we're getting the money, and then I'll tell you how that money is being used, and maybe address some other concerns that have come up. So funding sources. Ongoing money, again, year after year money that we will have, there is a 4.5% of sales tax. That's ongoing money. Currently, you're about $120 million, roughly, is what you're looking at, what that is annually. We also have some money coming in from the Wayfair or the tax relief fund or account there, and that's from online sales. We have 20% of that coming into this fund. When it kicks into play in 2025, it's about $25 million. Again, ongoing and growing sources of funds. We also have some one-time money, meaning we wanted to jumpstart the program this year. So when people see their tax bills at the end of the year and they start paying them, we wanted to have relief immediately. In order to do that, that 4.5% of the tax doesn't start collecting until July. We've already at best case scenario, so that money wouldn't necessarily be available for another year. Same thing with the Wayfair account. That money's not available immediately, and so how do we get tax relief immediately? And we do that with a couple transfers. One's a $75 million transfer from just general fund monies that we have this year. We've got a surplus that we can afford to take that from. We also have $130 million that comes out of the tax rebate fund. Those of you will remember that over the last couple of years, we've done some rebates back to taxpayers, and we set up a fund. We dumped a bunch of money into it. There's about $150 million left in it. Still think that we'll need to spend about $20 million more on additional rebates back to people, which leaves us about $130 million that we can take. So for the first year, we're guaranteed to have $200 million roughly available for tax relief. We also did one additional thing as far as source of funding, and that was using the surplus eliminator. If you've been here a while, you know what surplus eliminator is. Those of you who have not, It's essentially when we're done at the end of the year with what our checkbook, we thought it would have X amount of dollars at the end of the day when we balanced our book at the end of June or July 1. If there's more money in there than we thought, that's a surplus. We're taking up to $150 million of that, and we're also putting it into this formula. So if you're doing your math in your head, first year, that means 205 plus up to 150. Again, I say up to because that's surplus eliminator, no guarantee. So we're at least 205 up to $355 million for the first year. Second year, we don't have some of those transfers, but we do have the 4.5% kicking in, and that's where we're starting to see that make it up again with the surplus eliminator. So you could have a range again in that second year of how much tax relief you would have. And that would be as little as 122 million, as much as 272 million. So that's your second year. And your third year, then we go up a little bit more because of where we project these numbers to be, and you're at $182 million minimum, as much as $330 million tax relief. So that's the amount of money that we're talking available for tax relief bill. The surplus eliminator only goes for 3 years. After that, we can come back and we can put more money into that if we choose to. The ongoing money will continue to go on. So about that 200 million will continue to go on by the time you hit 2026. That's around where we'll be expecting those numbers to be, and that will continue to go on as we move forward. So what do we do with this money? And before, maybe I had to back up one other thing here that I need to address. A couple things, I should say. The circuit breaker. Circuit breaker is a program that we have here in the state for those who are unable to pay their taxes because low income, and we have a program already established for them to help reduce their taxes. There's some criteria that you have to meet in order to hit that. It's income based, and it's also the value of your house based. So currently it's around $31,000 that you can make annually. If you make more than that, then you're excluded from it. We're increasing that up to $37 million, and that will, 37,000, I apologize for switching between millions and thousands. Been dealing with millions too long on this bill. So you could make up to $31,000. We also increased the cap on your home. So there were some limitations on that already. So if you had $1 million home, we weren't going to pay your taxes. But if you had a more modest house, then we would have tax relief available. And so we increased that from, I think, $300,000 to $400,000. We also increased it from the median, which was the median price of the home within an area. I think it was 150. We increased that to 200%. So we've increased those to help with individuals who may have been on circuit breaker before, who got kicked off because of their house valuation increased. So that's something that we did, which is important, I think, to note. Next thing I'll talk about a little bit is where some of this money goes and what we're doing with it. And there's essentially two sides of the bill. Part of the money will go directly to homeowners. Those are your primary residents. If you think of those who have your homeowner's exemption, you think of those properties, that's what we're talking about. Those individuals will receive a bulk of the money going there. It depends, and again, it changes a little bit year to year on how much goes to that, and I could really get into the weeds on that if you want, but I can talk about how that gets split. But for the most part, if you just think 50-50, that's close. We can get a little bit more detailed on that, nuanced as we go through it. But that money that we've got available will go into what we call the Senate side, which they liked over there, which would go to all homeowners with a homeowner's exemption. It will go based on a percentage. So if you think of homes there, if you've got two different priced homes and they're paying different amounts of property tax, they would each receive approximately the same percentage of a decrease towards their thing. More you pay, more you get reduction on it. So they would do that. So if it works out, depending on in that area, 10 to 15%, all properties would get 10 to 15% reduction in that particular area. That does vary though, because of those vary based on county numbers, and so that does change a little bit. So that's where the money goes to on one side of the equation. Goes to all people who have homeowners exemptions, and it's evenly divided up to give them the same percentage of relief. The other part of the formula, or as far as where money goes, is really my favorite part of it, because I think this is the part that will provide really meaningful long-term relief. And we're going to address it by looking at schools. Why did we pick schools? Remember, 30% of your property tax goes towards paying for bonds and levies. And we have the constitutional responsibility to fund our schools. So it made sense for us to look at making sure, let's put some money into there. We also have problems with certain areas, districts that have a hard time passing bonds and levies. Part of that is people just don't want to, but a significant part of that, as far as why they can't or they won't, is because they don't have a lot of private property within that area. And so if you think of these areas that have a lot of public land and very little private property, there's nothing to tax. And so even if they have a small bond, the tax to those individuals is massive. And that's one of the reasons why they have a hard time passing those types of bonds. And that we're going to help solve that problem with this. We're also not going to reward districts that pass more bonds and levies by giving them more money. I think that's very important to understand, that there is no benefit because you pass them or not pass them. We're going to give that money based on average daily attendance. Why average daily attendance? That question's come up numerous times. Why didn't you use enrollment? Well, keep in mind, we're dealing with a fixed amount of money. And being that it's fixed, if you assume, which most of us understand, enrollment is a little bit inflated beyond, as far as a higher number usually than average daily attendance, they're still going to receive the same ratio of that money that they would have if we did enrollment across the board. We also wanted to make sure that we were affecting those schools, the ones that had the people there the most, as opposed to a lot of online people signed up possibly, where they did not have the facility building needs that you would elsewhere. So again, that's where the money would be going, based on average daily attendance to the various districts. So every kid is worth a certain dollar amount, and it goes that way to all the districts. So all of the districts here, we can all say, yep, we all got our fair share. Now, what are we going to ask them to do with that money? And that's where we get into property tax relief. The first thing that they will be required to do with that money is to use it to pay your bond indebtedness. So if you've got a bond payment for that year, you're going to pay that bond payment with this additional money. That will provide tax relief to those people in that area. If you have money beyond that, it will be used to pay for levies. Again, tax relief. And also, it's very important to note, we do not allow them to collect that tax payment and use the money from this program. We're not going to let them double up. So they can't take the money, pay it, and then still collect it. So it will be real property tax relief to those individuals. That's important. There are many districts that don't have a lot of bonds and levies, some of these smaller ones and some of these rural ones, and so they'll have money beyond that. So they're still, remember, they're getting their money, and so what are they going to do with the money? They can save it if they want for future construction needs, or they can bond against that source of money to help with their construction. So we're helping to satisfy that need that they had in those districts. And that's really important, and I think a really neat aspect of this particular bill, because we're providing that funding mechanism for them to address their problems in the future. Now, I'll be honest with you, it's not as much money as I would like to have into that part of the equation, the school funding side. I'd like to get a lot more in there. And I think we can, I just don't think we can get it all in this year. And so, is there more money available in years to come? I hope so, and it's my intent that we would be able to put enough money into there that we never have to bond again. That's my goal. I'd be very upfront about that. I've been telling everybody that. I want to put enough money in here that if I take away their ability to bond, they won't care, the school districts, because they're like, we don't care. In fact, we don't like going to bonding. They hate it. It's a pain in the neck for them. None of them like doing that. They just have to do it because they need to get their buildings built. So I'm full disclosure telling you what I'm trying to do is to get this fund set up. We're providing tax relief immediately, and we're providing a funding mechanism that we can actually get to the point where they don't ever have to come back for bonds in the future. That's not going to happen this year. There's not enough money in there to be able to say that we've achieved that goal. But that is something that we want to do. Because we're providing this additional money into the funding for bonds and levies, one of the other aspects is we've removed the March election date. There's 4 election dates. The March election date is removed in here. That's brought up some concern, I know, with a lot of, with some of you. And Mr. Speaker, at this time, can I refer to pending legislation, other pending legislation?
As consent has been requested to refer to pending legislation. Is there objection? Hearing none, the good gentleman may refer to the legislation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If you will remember, in this body, we passed, and I don't remember the House bill number, but we passed House bill number that came from State Affairs that removed 2 dates, the August and the March date, and we sent that over to the Senate, and it's on the amending orders over there right now. So there is an appetite within this body. We passed it with significant numbers that we felt that we needed to probably remove some of those dates because of the simple fact that this deals with property tax, and that is how a lot of your property taxes are raised through that March election date. Now, why the March election date? I know that's come up, and I'm going to spend some time, and I apologize I'm spending so much time right now, Mr. Speaker, but I'm trying to answer the questions that I know are out there. March election date. In order to have a bond levy on the March election date, you have to have that information to the Secretary of State 50 days before that election. Go back 50 days from today and think where were we? We were back in the end of January. And did we have our budget set for education yet? The answer to that is no. In fact, I know a lot of work happened between then and now coming up with the budget on what we were going to do. And I don't even know what that budget is yet. I know JFAC's been working on that, and they're doing their thing. But that number will be set. But I always find it interesting that districts are asking for additional money through levies before they even know what their budgets are. Don't even know what it is, don't even know how much we're going to give them. I saw a press release today from a gentleman on the second floor talking about how wonderful some of these programs we've done to help increase teacher pay. I think we're in the top 10 now, or will be in the top 10 for teacher pay, which is pretty impressive from where we came from back in 47 or wherever we were at. But we didn't know that until just in this last week on where we were going to be. So it seems to me that we should probably wait to find out what the budget is before you go ahead and start asking for additional money from the taxpayers. That is why the March date was selected. There is still the May date right afterwards, not very much longer later. You can hit the May date as well, and that gets you before you have any of those deadlines with signing contracts in July, or setting their budgets in the July meeting. That's another requirement. They have to set their budgets in their July meeting. And again, those July meetings can be at any time during July. They have to sign the teacher contracts by January. But there's plenty of time for them to be able to find out what we passed in the budgets, put it on for a May election date if necessary, for them to be able to do that. So hopefully I've talked a little bit about that and why we chose to do that. The other question that's come up a little bit is on constitutionality. And I know that's come up recently, so I'm flipping over here to some information about that. Probably the best court case dealing with single subject matters, at least what's still kind of the gold standard referred to by the Supreme Court, is Boise City versus Baker. And in that, I could read, I don't want to bore you with that, but I have the information here, and it talks about how you can have single subject does not just mean singles in the same section of code. It just means, are you dealing with the same subject matter? You can have multiple sections of code dealing with different things. We are dealing with property tax here. And obviously you heard all those funding sources of where we're getting it. We're getting it at a lot of different locations to put it into this bill. The election, that is where property tax originates in the elections. That's where 30% statewide property tax originates, comes out of those elections. So it seemed appropriate that we should or could be able to address it within this bill. Have more information there if you are interested in that. I am sure I'm forgetting some things, Mr. Speaker, at this time. I will just probably sit down and see if there's any questions that I can help answer for you. But I do want to just close my opening comments with a little bit of a shout out to some of those people who've worked on this tremendously a lot. It wasn't just, I'd like to take all the credit here on the House side. It was not. This was a bill that we worked on a lot within members of this body. including members from the other side of the aisle that we talk to over there. Good gentleman, I don't remember your name, your number over there, so I can't even give you a shout out there without looking really hard. 28, 26. No,
The bearded one is
26.
26.
So good gentleman over there, worked a lot on this, had a lot of conversations with him, and as well as the Mr. Speaker as well was integral in this, along with a couple of the senators that we worked with, and I don't know their numbers, so I can't refer to them by name anyway. But we worked on this with a lot of different people. We ended up with a bill that is supported by a lot of organizations. IACI is supportive of this, the Farm Bureau is supportive of this, the Association of Counties is supportive of this, the Association of Cities is supportive of this legislation. And so I think we came up with a bill that addresses the immediate needs for property tax relief. It also provides long-term relief, and it also helps address our school funding formula all at the same time. And so, Mr. Speaker, I'm proud of this legislation, and I would ask for your green light on it.
Okay, good gentlemen, for the debate on the motion, good gentleman 16.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the good gentleman from 22 yield to a question?
Gentleman yield.
Gentleman yields.
Gentleman yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, good gentleman. I'm looking at section 18 of the bill, the emergency clause. It looks like this is retroactive to January 1st. My question is, if we pass this bill before the March election, how does that affect the election up until the time it's certified?
Gentleman 22.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If that election's already taken place, it won't affect him. The reason we wanted to go back to the January 1 date was because we wanted to provide property tax relief for this year, taxes, and that is why we put that date in there. If that election has already happened, which I believe it's happening, and by the time this would be signed and everything, that would have already taken place, and we wouldn't undo it any more than we would undo any other election that took place prior to this date.
Gentleman 16.
The good gentleman yield to another question?
Gentleman yields.
Gentleman 22 yield. Gentleman 22 yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, good gentleman. What I'm concerned about is if this bill passes, the election's happened, but the results haven't been certified yet, that a court might rule the election null and void, excuse me. It's late. And I'm wondering if you've received any formal legal opinion to the effect that you've just shared.
Gentleman 22.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good gentleman. On that specific topic, no, I have not asked on that specific question from a legal opinion on it from anybody. Our understanding with the drafters as we wrote this that would not be a problem because it would have already taken place and already happened. If that legal challenge was to be able to go through it, you could make that argument for last year's elections too. It's just we don't think it's a problem if that election's already taken place.
Thank you, good gentleman.
For the debate on the motion, gentleman 31.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for a question.
Gentleman 22 yield.
Gentleman yields.
Gentleman yields.
Gentlemen, will any of these ongoing revenues that go to cities and counties go to conferences or clubs?
That's a damn good question.
Mr.
Gentleman 22.
Mr. Speaker, I would have loved to have heard that joke, but I did not. I was focusing on trying to find my page. You're going to have to say that one again.
Will any of these ongoing revenues that go to cities and counties go to conferences or clubs?
Double whammy. You should have left it alone, good gentleman.
Mr. Speaker, actually, they don't go to the cities and counties at all.
Oh.
It goes to your tax bill at the bottom line. So your taxes are your taxes, and if you think of it this way, if you owed $1,000, and for your area, and you were going to see a 20% reduction in your taxes still go to all those various things, cities, counties, local, irrigation districts, all those things still get their money. We're just going to subtract it off the bottom line with this dollar amount. So they're going to still be able to do whatever they wanted with their money. The credit goes to the individual taxpayer, not to the local taxing district.
I'll take that as a no. To debate in favor of the bill.
The gentleman has the floor.
Thank you. I just want to say a few words about this bill and how impressed I was that we took 3 bills, put them together, showed a spirit of compromise here and across the rotunda and across the aisle. And I'm impressed with the professionalism that this bill came out, and I appreciate everybody's work, and I'm going to give it my green light.
Thank you, gentlemen. Further debate on the motion. Good gentleman, 25.
Mr. Speaker, to debate the bill.
Gentleman has the floor.
I rise in favor of the bill, but I do have a few concerns, just like the gentleman from 22 mentioned. I actually liked the good senator from 10's bill the best, and I don't see a lot of it's in here, but there's probably some. I also like the portion of the original, one of the original bills that talked about moving it from the homeowner's exemption up to 175. I like that as well. I don't see that in here. I also like, I recall from one of the original bills that the third place they could take it from the bonds and the levies, they could actually, the district could use it for maintenance.
Good gentlemen, we're really going past debate when we're talking about previous bills without asking unanimous consent to talk about those, and I kind of thought you were stopping, but you kept rolling.
I'll move on to just this bill then.
So if you would like to respond to this bill, or you could ask unanimous consent to talk about all those other bills.
I think I got it all out already.
All right, I think you did a pretty good job of doing it too. And the speaker was looking for something and didn't catch you till you'd gone on too long. So anyway, good gentleman, may continue.
This particular bill does take something out that I feel is quite important. That's the March date. I still will be voting for the bill, but I will hope that others may, in this building, may amend it to put that back in, because I do think that is a very important date. I would also hope that somebody along the line will increase the homeowner's exemption. I believe that's also quite important for our citizens. I would also like to, well, I guess that would refer, could I have, I'd like to ask for unanimous consent to consider the good bill that the gentleman from 35 just passed recently. Can I refer to it?
Mr. Speaker, I object.
There's been an objection to the unanimous consent request.
I won't then. Okay.
Thank you, good gentleman. With the good gentleman from 20, when we object to a motion, we need to stand, you recognize, and then you object. So we'll be careful about that. Good gentleman, 25.
I will get to it in a different manner then, sir.
Thank you, gentleman.
I would like to see that we make it clear that this could be put on the ballots for bonds and levies, that this may be, that bond or levy payment for that year may be paid by the proceeds from this bill. I think that would be helpful to the cities, whoever's running a levy or a bond. With that, I go ahead and say yes, I will be voting in favor of this. I just think that there's some improvements that could be made.
Thank you, gentlemen. Further debate on the bill. Gentleman, 17.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, to debate against the bill.
Gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Concern that I have is that we may be actually reducing the funding for our schools. This is property tax relief. The gentleman has done an excellent job on the property tax side, but not so good on the school side when the March election date is eliminated. Let's look at just some of the facts on bonds and levies. Since 2000, 52% of bonds have passed, 96% of plant facilities have passed, 93% of supplemental levies have passed. That's according to Idaho Education News. In 2022, a total of $596 million was paid by property taxpayers for levies and bonds. 218 million of that was in supplemental levies, the balance in the bonds. 91 of 115 school districts have levies. And tomorrow, there will be an election in 47 school districts who will consider $1 billion in bonds and levies to support the schools. And when these bonds and levies are passed, it is the voters who are doing that. It is the people. Anybody can go vote. And when they are considered is usually in the March election. And the reason they're considered in the March election is so that the school districts can plan. They've got to figure out how many personnel they're going to be hiring. They've got to figure out what kind of space, what kind of extracurricular activities they're going to fund. So they're going to bring these levies, these additional funds in the March election. That's why there's $1 billion on the table tomorrow in these elections. And we don't know the result. Certainly, probably not all going to pass. There's going to be a whole lot passed. So the $100 million in this bill isn't really going to make much of a dent. It's better, it's good, and it's good, well-intentioned, but it's not solving the problem. And taking away the March election will compound the problem for our schools. Now, I'm sitting here as a property tax reduction advocate. I'd support all of the bill until I get to this March election thing. And then I have to say, well, yeah, but this is going to affect my schools. And I support public education. And it's going to affect the schools because that March date is not going to be there. It can take away the August date because then things have already settled down. You know what your budget's going to be. You've hired your personnel and all that. But that March date's when you do your planning. And that means they're not going to be able to plan. And yes, that means they're probably going to have less bonds and levies. And if that's the goal, then that's what will happen. And there'll be less support for our schools. I want to see the schools made whole. I want to see our education supported. I want to see it. I want to see adequate funding. And until that happens, I cannot support a bill which is taking away an essential tool that our school districts have to give our kids an education. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, gentlemen. Further debate on the motion. Good gentleman, 13.
Mr. Speaker, point of clarification. I believe the good gentleman meant the bond and elections today. Don't want to confuse any voters potentially that are watching and thinking that they're voting tomorrow.
I was going to bring
Bond
that up.
elections are today, I
think it's
believe.
today,
So
Tuesday.
Yeah.
That's the problem with the March date, by the way.
Yes.
Would the good
That
lady
is
from
the problem.
6,
Thank you, Mr.
good lady from 6 care to just debate the bill?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The speaker should not have said that. I apologize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, to debate in favor of the bill.
Good lady has the floor.
Thank you. So while I am very strongly in favor of any good tax bill to lower our property taxes, I wanted to ask the good gentleman a question in my debate, if I could.
Would the good gentleman 22 yield to a question from the good lady from 6?
Thank you.
Gentlemen yield.
Good lady.
Thank you, both good gentlemen. So in the bill where we talk about that the rural districts are going to get the same amount as the larger districts percentage-wise based on enrollments. And I was just curious if you could tell us, is there anything in the bill that would offset the difference between some of our rural districts, like where I serve? The lights are it still costs for lights, it still costs for teachers, it still costs for desks. And sometimes I feel that the rural districts kind of get the short end of the stick when it comes to funding only based on our ADA and students. So I just, and again, I haven't been able to read this word for word because I just got it yesterday, but is there anything that would help that issue?
Down 22.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We decided to do it on a per pupil basis, or average daily attendance, because that was the fairest way to address it. If we started to make changes, I think then I would have 70 different representatives clamoring that my district got the short end of the stick, and that seemed to be the most fair way of doing it.
Good lady from 6.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, good gentlemen. to finish just the debate, and I am.
It's your debate to debate the bill.
Yeah, to debate
lady
the
has the
bill.
floor.
Thank you. So, I, as many know, that I had a bill that I was bringing forward on the circuit breaker, and I thank this committee for giving even a higher percentage because than what I was proposing. And so I'm very happy for that, for the people in our smaller districts. And my
Gentleman from 13.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think she needs to ask unanimous consent to refer to other legislation. She's referring to a bill she's bringing forward.
Yeah, good point. Good speaker missed that. Would the good lady like to ask unanimous consent to refer to other possible legislation?
Thank you. So possible legislation that will not go forward, but my idea,
Would you want to read? Okay.
no, was, anyway.
Let's
I'm
keep it to
very
the bill, good
thrilled.
lady,
We'll
let's
keep
do
it
it.
to this bill that we have 200% of the median value. So thank you, committee, for that. I really think that's gonna make a big difference for our elderly. I do want to also mention on behalf of my school districts in my district that I've talked with all of them, and there is a huge concern about the March date. And I will just reiterate again that I think we need to take a look at that for the future if the dollars don't flow like we are hoping they will flow, because that March date is very critical for them, whether they have the numbers from our budgets or not. It's very important for them to know how many teachers that they can retain. So I just want to point that out to the body, that we keep that in mind. And the only other challenge that I'm having is the fact that I got the bill yesterday, as we all did. And I would just ask that in the future, if there's any way we can have at least a week to look at this, because I sent it out to all my counties, all my cities, and it's very difficult to expect them to get right back to. So, but in saying that, I am very proud that we are bringing a good tax reduction bill. And I do want to thank everyone who did work on this, and I'm excited to see how this plays out with all of our people. So thank you for all the work.
Thank you, good ladies. Further debate on the motion? Gentleman 25.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On debate in favor of the bill.
Gentleman has the floor.
First of all, I don't want to spend a lot of time on everything's been said. I agree with virtually everything I've said. I do have a little objection with the removal of the March date for school elections, but I wanted to ask a question of the sponsored gentleman for 22. And before I ask it, though, I want to say, his answer is not going to influence me, but I want to make sure we know the answer to this question moving forward. So if it has to be in the Senate to fix something, they have an opportunity to.
Gentleman from 22 yields to the question.
Gentleman yields.
Gentleman yields.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker and gentlemen. My thought is, in this bill, you said you must use the money for the bonds first, which I didn't have a problem with, but then you said, but they can't collect the bond. I'm worried or concerned because I don't read all of the bond council or the documents to every bond election, that it may require that it be a property tax payment. And we should check into that and maybe potentially put some flexibility in there if they must collect the property tax from that and use it for other relief somehow. But I was a little nervous about that, unless you already know the answer.
Gentleman 22.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good gentlemen, I don't believe that is a problem. In fact, if you want to go through as far as what districts are doing, is they're actually over collecting much more than they should. Sometimes instead of 12 months worth of payments, it's 21 months worth of payment, and is what they're doing, and collecting that and putting that into other funds. That I'm more concerned about than I am anything else. But I think we've captured the language in here that will not be a problem, though. And if that turned out to be a problem, I guess we would address it just like we do every other piece of legislation that we have in this building. But that has not been flagged by anybody as a concern in all of our research and our work on this.
Thank you, gentleman 22. Gentleman 25. Thank you, good gentleman 25. Further debate on the motion. Good gentleman from 30.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To debate the bill.
The gentleman has the floor.
Thank you. Good ladies and good gentlemen of the body, I feel like we came into this legislative session with a mandate of sorts to deliver meaningful property tax relief to the taxpayers of Idaho. And it's my belief that through House Bill 292, we will deliver on that mandate. I feel good about particularly three things that this bill does. First, I just like the bottom line. I think that it's more common than it should be to set out to deliver something really meaningful and to end up with something pretty paltry. And I think that this is a good, solid amount of property tax relief. And so from a bottom line standpoint, I'm proud of House Bill 292. Secondly, I love the fact that this is not simply a tax shift. We're not just taking and targeting some winners and paying for it through others that might be deemed losers in this process. We are literally giving relief across the board to property owners and to homeowners without shifting that burden onto anyone else. And third, I think that this is a good bill that is a consensus bill that kind of takes different views that were expressed and shared early in the session, and is a good balance between a focus on delivering relief to property owners across the board, but with a little extra emphasis to primary residence owners who have been particularly hard hit with increased taxes over the last 4 or 5 years. So three really good parts of this bill that I feel good about. I think there's lots to feel good about, but overall, I'm proud of the fact that through House Bill 292, we are going to deliver on the mandate that our constituents gave to us. Thank you.
Thank you, good gentlemen. Is further debate on the motion? Gentleman 21.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To debate in favor of the bill.
Gentleman has the floor.
Thank you. Most of you know that I really like numbers, so let me give you some numbers. If you look at the fiscal note and the potential impact of this property tax relief over 3 years, it's close to $1 billion over 3 years. To me, that is significant property tax relief. I also appreciate the good work that the sponsors have done on this bill. When we got here in January, I think the initial number floated was $120 million for the first year. But you look at what we've done in a couple short months, we've got that 3 times the amount of property tax relief in year one, is close to $360 million. So I think this is significant property tax relief. Some may have concerns that this is only just the first step, and the first step doesn't get us all the way to the finish line with school funding, but I don't think that doesn't mean you should not take the first step. I think we should take the first step. I'm hopeful that there can be additional things done in the future, but I'm excited for this bill and urge you to vote for it. Thank you.
Thank you, good gentlemen. Further debate on the motion. Good gentleman 22.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the better-looking member from 22, would like to compliment
Mr. Speaker,
the junior member
I object.
from 22 on a good job on House Bill 292.
Would you like to debate the bill?
No, I just wanted to compliment.
I thought you were going to get up and debate on who's the oldest member of the body. The further debate on the bill and not between the two gentlemen from 22. And your red representative. Good lady from 19, I'm sure you want to debate the bill.
That's correct, Mr. Speaker.
Good lady has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I desperately want property tax reduction for homeowners. It's kind of all I talk about. Doesn't make me a big hit at cocktail parties, but I think it's really important. And as has been said, I think it's in the top few things that we have to do this session. I appreciate that this bill focuses more on homeowners than commercial property. And I find a lot to like in it, and I appreciate that it recognizes that we have underfunded schools and facilities, but it does undermine a critical tool that we have that schools rely on to stay whole. So I have that concern and a few other deal breakers. I'll just underscore why the focus on homeowners is so appropriate. If you look at only property tax that was in existence in 2016 when the homeowners exemption was capped, we've seen homeowners have their property taxes go up 21%, while commercial property tax bills have gone down 24%. We heard testimony in committee that it's even more severe in Canyon County. Homeowners are paying 50% more. Commercial properties are paying 50% less. So it's appropriate and on target that we are focusing on homeowners. Still, I would mention that the focus does shift over time. So in year one, 2/3 of the funds go into the bucket that reduces property taxes for homeowners. But by year 3, that is flipped, and most of the funds go into buckets that support property tax reduction across the board, across all kinds of property taxpayers. And I just remain skeptical of the need to put state money into reducing tax bills for commercial taxpayers when they're number one going down already, and they'll continue to get the benefit of that capped homeowners exemption that's fueling the tax load because this bill doesn't do anything to address the homeowners exemption. I asked the Tax Commission for analysis about how different classes of taxpayers would be impacted by this bill, and they said they could not provide that because of the complexity of the bill and all of the moving pieces. I asked LSO for a detailed analysis of all of the pieces of the chunks of money that are moving this way and that, and I got a crazy diagram with 5 sections of the bill that has 9 arrows pointing to 3 different buckets, and what it feels like is that we're kind of, this bill is contorting itself to get around increasing the homeowners exemption. I am concerned about and I guess part of the question I asked one of my questions I wanted to pose to the Tax Commission is how this would impact different homeowners across our state, because a concern I have is that in the construction of the homeowners property tax relief is that it goes out in a percentage of your tax bill net of voter approved pieces of your tax bill. And so that means that really high wealth areas with high properties are going to get more of these dollars are going to flow to those areas, and I just would like to better understand. I don't think we have a good understanding of how this is going to impact rural communities that have lower levels of just property wealth overall. But the major deal breaker, and the first one, I guess the first deal breaker is taking away the March election for school levies and bonds. I don't know why this has to be part of a compromise. In all of my conversations with people inside and outside the Capitol about the need to reduce property taxes, no one said, yes, I really want to reduce property taxes, but only if we can also cancel an election, only if we can do that as well. I wish we never needed supplemental levies and bonds. I wish the state provided sufficient funding for schools, but the fact remains that we are 51st in the nation for school funding. And this bill will handcuff our schools in better times, and it will also handcuff them in bad times when state revenues are weak and we're not honoring the commitment we'd like to make. We've heard the March election date is critical for timing. It gives schools districts the best chance they have of, by today they'll know whether or not their levies and bonds pass. They're starting to get a good idea of what funds they'll get from the legislature, and then they can start making hiring offers and try to retain their staff for next year. We know they're struggling in rural areas. I can tell you here in Boise, where our schools have a lot more resources, I'm getting texts all the time from my school because they need education support staff. They have a vacancy that they just can't seem to fill. And when I look at the pay, I think, well, I'm not surprised that you can't fill that. If the March levy, if the March levy doesn't pass and schools are in dire straits, they still have that May option. And I think that those 2 dates are really important. I know they have this bill that lets them keep August and November. Those are too late. The school year's already started. March and May are really important, and if the March levy fails because voters didn't want to approve a certain amount, then they can have another go in May, maybe for half the amount. These elections are conversations that districts are having with voters about the levy amount they can support. This gives them local control, and it puts the control into voters' hands, and I don't know why we would take that away. Additional deal breakers for me are constitutionality concerns and also concerns about violation of our state code. Even if the policies in this bill were perfect, I believe it to be unconstitutional by violating the single subject rule that's in our state constitution. I've submitted a request to the AG's office for opinion, but as you know, this bill is moving quickly, and as it's been mentioned, there's a lot of complicated parts, so I don't have that yet. But this, because this bill is dealing with election law and property tax provisions, I'd also note this bill on page 19, line 48, appropriates funds. It says the word right there. Idaho Code 673514 prescribes that only JFAC can prescribe funds. So I'm worried about process and whether this bill could even hold up in court. I think some provisions in this bill that aren't getting enough attention are buried in page 19, and that has to do with TECM. If you're not familiar with TECM, it's sales tax funds that we use for roads and bridges, and they're split between state and highway districts, and it's how we, as a state, recognize that we've been behind on maintenance and we're putting money into fixing our roads and bridges. And this bill caps the funding that our local highway districts rely on to make those needed investments. And it's going to, with the way things are trending, it's good that this proposed cap is going to hit very soon. So what happens when this contribution doesn't keep up with the local needs? Well, maintenance falls by the wayside, and highway districts have to take more in property taxes. So this bill could actually increase property taxes. I also would love, if I had more time, to understand better the impact on special taxing districts. Permanently taking online sales tax out of the revenue sharing will have an impact on irrigation districts, fire districts, EMS districts, and I would like to better understand what that looks like over time. It's been stated here already, that March date is critical, and I just can't support a bill that takes away a critical tool for our schools and is going to put our kids in dire straits and hope that somebody, across maybe the august body across the rotunda is gonna fix that problem. I can't knowingly vote for a bill that's gonna hurt our schools and just hope somebody else is gonna fix that problem and pass the buck, no matter how much I want property tax reduction. I believe that we cannot adjourn without reducing property taxes. I think the political will is there to do it, and I see this bill as the first offer, the first option, and I think we can reject it and ask to go back to the drawing board and have a property tax bill that meets constitutional muster and doesn't hurt our schools in the process. Thank you.
Thank you, good ladies. Is there further debate on the motion? Hearing none. Good lady from 32.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, to debate in favor of the bill.
Good lady has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Permission or unanimous consent request to refer to pending legislation.
Unanimous consent has been requested to refer to pending legislation. Is there objection? Hearing none, the good lady may refer to pending legislation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This morning in the Joint Finance and Appropriation Committee, we passed the highest ever budget for public schools. $378.5 million new funding. That's a $3.3 billion budget for public schools. That's a 50% increase for your classified staff, librarians, paraprofessionals, bus drivers, etc. That's an almost 15% increase for your teachers. That's a 20% increase in discretionary funding, which comes with no strings attached and which have historically been spent on salaries and health insurance. An almost 11% increase in health insurance. We have met the current obligation. Districts levy for approximately $215,000 right now in supplemental levies. We met their $215 and raised it $163 million. We should not need to see supplemental levies in the future, given these funds. How are we going to sustain this in the future when we know we're going to have a declining enrollment because we have a declining birth rate? That's a really good question. But that's the budget that came out of the Joint Finance and Appropriation Committee this morning. So I've been on a school board, and you can run these levies in November if there's a question of what your needs are going to be instead of March. So I am fully in support of this, and remember, $61 million of that this year just goes directly to schools. In addition to the $375 78.5 I just mentioned. So this is on top of that. Additionally, we've passed a $50 million bill for career technical education expansion. Separately, we added another 10 million in career technical education agency. We've added another 50 million, or we will if the bill passes, in a charter school revolving loan fund. We've added $20 million for school safety and security. Folks, that's almost an additional $200 million outside the public school budget that will be going to public schools. Yes, some of it is one time, but we are approaching $600 million of new funding for public schools this year. This is a perfectly reasonable bill, and to remove the March levy date is a smart move to make at this point. And they still have 3 others they can choose if they need to. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, good lady. It's further debate on the motion. Lady from 18.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To speak about the bill?
Sure you have positive things to say. The good lady has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I truly headed in today not sure which way I was going to vote. I guess maybe I'm still not sure which way I'm going to vote. I'm really wrestling with this. I feel like this is... I think of this bill as kind of a monkey's paw bill. I don't know if you remember that old story where there's a monkey's paw that you can make any wish and your wish will come true, but it will come true in this horrible way at a terrible cost. I have been wanting nothing more than property tax relief for like 5 years. We've brought bill after bill after bill. I am desperate. My constituents are desperate for property tax relief, and there's so much in this bill that I really, really like. But I am just wrestling with this crippling effect I believe that it will have on our schools. And if they truly don't need the money, they truly will not bring these bonds or levies. Nobody wants to do this, as was noted. It's kind of a nightmare for the people who have to bring it. But at the end of the day, I do not believe that the budgets we're looking at are going to solve the problem. The money we're talking about is a fraction of what is on the ballot today across Idaho. It does not solve the problem. I think it all adds up to maybe half of what is needed and what is being asked for just today. And it doesn't address the long-term into perpetuity effect this is going to have, creating an inability to ask for funds when they need it most. So I'm really concerned about that. And I think we can have it all. I think we can address our property tax problems in a way that does not hobble schools' ability to fund themselves going forward. But beyond that, I agree with what the gentleman from 30 said. We have a mandate. This is what people want more than anything. They want property tax relief. And because it is our top priority, because it's so essential, I think we have an obligation to get it right and to get it right legally. And I think that this is on really thin ice legally, honestly. I believe that if somebody brought it and challenged it on the single subject rule, and frankly, I'm really concerned about that piece that on its face kind of looks like it's voiding $1 billion worth of school funding that's on the ballot today. But I think that single subject rule is potentially fatal to this bill. And I think we owe it to the people of Idaho to bring a bill that's going to hold up in court, that's going to get them the property tax they need and that they're counting on. And I think we need to get rid of that election piece. I think it throws this whole bill into serious legal jeopardy. And so I don't know what I'm going to do still on this bill. If I knew for sure they were going to amend it across the rotunda to get rid of that piece, I'd vote for it in a New York minute. But I'm really, really wrangling with that piece. I think we should be doing something that's legally more viable here.
Thank you, good ladies. Further debate on the motion? Hearing none. Good gentleman, 15.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a quick comment and then perhaps a question for the sponsor.
Gentleman has the floor, I'm assuming, to debate the bill with your comment.
Well, probably to lead into the question. So the good lady from 32 said we should not see supplemental levies in the future, and I think that is the goal. But I want to be in light of what we heard about the $1 billion that are on ballots today across the state to fund education, and the OPE report showing we have anywhere from $900 million to $1.3 billion backlog in K through 12 school building maintenance. These are not supplemental bonds and levies, folks. These are annual operational bonds and levies. And so it's really important to understand that, and I think everyone would agree that no school district, or almost no school district, wants to float bonds and levies. They're doing it because they have to, because they want to keep class sizes well under 40 kids per, they want to be able to make sure that, that they can have good facilities that are attractive, can perform. So the question so I'd like to, if I could, with that as a backdrop, I'd like to ask the good gentleman, the sponsor, if he's willing to
Mr.
take a
Speaker.
question.
Good lady from me.
Point of order. My understanding is there's a question and then there's debate and you have to make up your mind. Is that how it works around here, or have we changed the system?
Generally, that's how it works. That's why I asked if the gentleman was debating the bill. I think he was trying to structure his question. He probably could have done it when he asked the question in a better manner, but that's what it is. Good gentleman, we'll be a little more careful with that.
Well, actually, if I may, Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure how I'm going to vote yet. So I wanted to share that perspective in the context of a question to the sponsor.
Hey, good gentleman, I think you could do that in debate, but we're okay. We'll just be a little careful. Good gentleman, 22.
Mr. Speaker, point of order.
Good gentleman has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, could I read from Mason's
I just want to
section 114?
You can read from our rules. Go ahead, good gentleman.
So Mason's section 114, asking questions of member number 6. The purpose of a question is to obtain information and not supply it to the body. A question may not contain statements of fact unless they are necessary to make the question more intelligible and cannot be authenticated. Neither should a question contain arguments. Under that context, I would yield to a question, but not arguments or statements of fact in order to present your question.
Thank you, gentlemen. And the speaker would caution us. You've seen it the last few days as we've tried to use questions to set people up maybe. As we've asked questions that we knew the answers to. And this year I've seen more and more where we ask long questions where we're actually debating. You can do better than that, and I will try to do a better job of counseling you when we do that in the future. With that, good gentleman from 15, you do have the floor, and the gentleman is yielding to your question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, good gentleman, and I appreciate that. Thank you for extending that to me, courtesy. My question is simply this, that until we know that we have come up with policy that is in fact reducing the need for supplemental or bonds and levies, wouldn't it be more prudent to keep the dates on the calendar until we know that we don't need them?
Gentleman, 22.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I did ask permission to refer to this legislation before, and I'm going to continue to refer to that legislation that I already asked permission for. This body overwhelmingly supported legislation to remove 2 dates. This is actually a softer touch on that, and felt that this was an appropriate way of addressing that concern as well. I think property taxes is a result of bonds and levy elections as well. In fact, we ask, and oftentimes one of the reasons why people get frustrated with March dates, August dates, is because people don't show up because it's not a normal time to vote. If we truly want to find out what the people want, then we should address it in a presidential election on November's only. If you really want to know what the people want. If we want to get less than a fraction of the number of people who vote, then run them in March. Because that's what happens. We have a very small minority of people who are voting to put taxes on the majority of the people. That's what happens with March. There's plenty of other opportunities for us to provide for them in November, as the good lady had mentioned. May is available there as well. I don't see the need for any more of them.
Thank you, good gentlemen. We need to be careful. We're starting to debate in our answers too. All right, further debate on the motion. It's been fun today. It's going once, going twice. The gentleman from District 22, care to close?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was told to be very brief.
Was that told or threatened?
I was requested to be brief by one of my good colleagues here, but I do want to at least address some of those things that came up. One of the concerns was about the homeowner's exemption. I think this is really important that we understand this concept of homeowner's exemption. People always go back to 2016. That's the magic number. That's the number when we had the appropriate ratio, apparently, of what homeowners versus non-homeowners pay. That's what I'm told. Everybody says 2 in 2016. Well, why don't we go back a few more years? Why don't we look what the ratio was there? For some reason, we think 2016 was the magic number. But while we're at it, let's go back to 1985, 1981. There was no homeowners exemption. Why do we pick that date? We picked that date just because it happened to be you can see the greatest change. But for some reason, we want to belabor the point and make this argument that somehow that was the magic number. That's the magic ratio. I'd love to be able to come up with the magic ratio. And I thought about this a lot in trying to come up with a good bill on how we could come up with what's the proper ratio of commercial agricultural versus homeowners. And I might be able to come up with that ratio for a city, but I can almost guarantee it will be a different ratio for another city. And I know it will be a different ratio from another city and another county. Property tax is a wealth tax. If you have more wealth, you will pay more. That's how it is. We decided at some point that we liked homeownership, and so we wanted to increase the benefit to them, and we did with the homeowners exemption when we first put it on. And in this bill, approximately 3/4 of all the dollars will go just to homeowners. We've addressed the issue if you think there's an inequity between the two. And this bill does that. We talked about the election in March. I think I belabored that point enough, but I will bring this up. They talked about it being $1 billion on there. It's not $1 billion of payments, though. How much will $100 million bond for? Over $1 billion. So we are making a very good start on that and a very good addressing that problem there. Timing of the bill brought up. We ran out essentially this bill at the very beginning of February. Looked a little different, had different numbers on it, but we did that intentionally to show everybody this is what we're looking at. And it's going to be some combination of that. I apologize that we didn't get the agreement done earlier to where you could see it earlier in the session, but that's how long it took for us to get there. And I think it's unfair to say that this was sprung on anybody and they didn't know what was in it, because these concepts have been talked about for the last 2 months. A little bit on the funding side of education. I always love that comment when we're 50, 51, or 49, thank goodness for Mississippi, or whatever the comment happens to be on our funding on education. What we never talk about is Idaho's commitment to education. Let's look at the percentage of our budget that goes to education as compared to other states. We have one of the best. We are committed in this state for funding education. We put the vast majority of our money there, and as a percentage of our budget, it proves it. We are a poorer state. That's welcome to Idaho. There is no fix needed. This is a good bill. It'd be extremely offensive to me if we did try to go ahead and change this bill. This bill does exactly what we want it to do. Exactly with the parameters that I was given. And Mr. Speaker, I would love to read from Boise City versus Baxter to clarify on the single subject. I think it's important that people hear the rationale on why this is okay.
And as consent has been requested to read from the court ruling, is there objection? Hearing none, the good gentleman may read.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and this is a portion of it. It says a single act may embrace many subjects and not be duplicitous if they pertain to matters that are properly connected with the subject of the act. It is said that if the provisions of an act all relate directly or indirectly to the same subject, having a natural connection therewith, and are not foreign to the subject expressed in the title, they may be united in one act. We're dealing about property tax. Every one of these issues deals with property tax. There is no single subject problem. That is a red herring. It's there. It's easy. It's in our legislative intent. If you want to read that at the beginning of the bill, you'll see the tie to it directly. And I think this is a good bill, and I look forward to seeing a green board up there, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, gentlemen. Debate's closed. Question is, shall House Bill 292 pass the House? The clerk will unlock the machine and the members will please cast their votes. Has every member voted? Representative Birch, would you like to vote? Does any member wish to change their vote? Clerk will lock the machine and record the roll. 63 ayes, 7 nays, the majority having voted in favor of House Bill 292. House Bill 292 has passed the House. Is there correction to title?
No correction to title.
Hearing none, the title is approved. The bill will be transmitted to the